So I've been saying all along that the one thing that I guarantee the Republicans will do, and Donald Trump, even in his incredible incompetence, will actually get done, is giant tax cuts for the rich. Now, they don't say it's going to be tax cuts for the rich. When you read their proposal, you're like, oh my God, that's trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the rich and for multinational corporations. But they, in order to make it sound better, they call it tax reform. Now, have the Republicans ever reformed taxes and moved them up? No. Have they ever moved them up for the rich or corporations? No. No, tax reform means we move them down for the rich and down for corporations. Sometimes they'll throw a small tax cut for the middle class too, so they can say, I mean, you guys got something to do, you got 5% of the tax cuts, enjoy, right? You got the crumbs off our table. But tax reform does not mean increases, it definitely means cuts. We've already seen the proposals. So what are the Democrats going to do? They did a good job of resisting on healthcare, and they're bragging about it now. They held their whole caucus. That Republican proposal was polling at 17%. If you can't hold your entire caucus on something polling at 17%, you should get out of politics immediately. Anyway, but give them credit, they did hold, and I'm very happy about that. So are they going to continue to resist on tax cuts? Looks like no. I told you. All right, let's go to Reuters for the story. US Senate Democrats offered to work with Republicans on a bipartisan tax reform package on Tuesday, but only if it does not cut taxes for the wealthy, add to the federal deficit, or allow Republicans to enact legislation on their own. Laugh along with me. Which Republican tax proposal doesn't cut taxes for the rich? This is a preposterous statement. It helps the Republican cover up. Okay, continuing. In Tuesday's letter, Democrats said bipartisan tax reform should offer no relief for the wealthy. Come on, I just stop reading it. Mnuchin says, oh yeah, there's gonna be no absolute tax cut for the upper class. No one in their right mind believes that. Really, Chuck Schumer, no tax cuts for the rich, that's gonna be what the Republican proposal is? You're even acknowledging that as a possibility is to help their cover up. Calling it tax reform is to help their cover up. You already know what's in the proposal. We covered it on the Young Turks. You know what it's in there. It's trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the rich. What is the bipartisan part of that? What is the part where they don't cut? It is not conceivable that the Republicans say, oh, you know what? Chuck, you're right. Let's just do a tax cut for the poor and the middle class, but definitely not for the rich. Okay, US Senate Democrats in that letter said, tax reform cannot be a cover story for delivering tax cuts to the wealthiest. Okay, they're not gonna fight him, they're not. Okay, it gets worse. All right, so 43 Senate Democrats and 2 independents signed the letter. I think even the well-meaning there should not have signed the letter, I'll get to that in a second. Absent were the names of 3 Democrats facing re-election next year: Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Do you understand that those 3 holdouts, they're not like, oh no, I don't want tax cuts for the rich. They're saying, I won't even sign a letter saying that I want it to be revenue neutral, or I don't want tax cuts for the rich. Those 3 are saying, no, I kind of agree with the Republicans. I don't mind if there's tax cuts for the rich. Of course they're gonna pass it. It's incredible naivete to not understand that this is the #1 thing that donors want. There's no way they don't get what they want on this issue. No way. This is why I always tell you ahead of time. So it's not Monday morning quarterbacking. You'll see. And yes, I told you from day one, some Democrats will help them and will sign it. Okay, so now even the Democrats say, oh no, but we need tax reform because corporate taxes are so high. That is grossly misleading. Now let me show you, because yes, the highest rate is 35% for taxes for corporations. But the reality is they don't pay that. In fact, here, let me skip to graphic 12 first. This is quoting a report, and New York Times wrote about this. The report found that even when foreign, state, and local taxes were included, which is not normally included in those calculations, but they threw all that in too. The tax rate of large companies rose only to 16.9% of total income, still well below the official 35%. In other words, they're not paying 35%. It's a lie. They're actually paying less than 17%, about half of what they claim they're paying. That's the real taxes that they're paying. So now some Democrats will say, no, that's what we're gonna reform it and we're gonna move it down to 20 or 25%, but we're gonna take away all the loopholes, so it's gonna be a real 20, 25%. No, you're not. You're not gonna take away all the loopholes. You're gonna keep most of the loopholes. You'll take away a couple of small loopholes, and then they'll cheat on the 20 or 25% and bring it way down. And even if you take away a couple of small loopholes, they're gonna put them back in 2 or 3 years when no one's paying attention. This is all a giant scam. So who's paying more taxes? Because this is all about wealth redistribution, but not in the way that you imagine. They redistribute the wealth to the top. So back in 1952, here's what the taxes look like. This the pie chart on the left there. Corporations, as you can see there, paid 32.1% of all the taxes. In 2015, they redistributed the wealth right to them and they moved the taxes to you. So if you think taxes are high, that's because they are high on you. On the middle class, they moved all the taxes to the payroll tax, which is what the middle class pays. That's the most regressive tax we have. And corporations now pay less than 11%. It went from 32 to less than 11%. So they're not taxed at a historically high rate, they're taxed at a historically low rate in reality. So for the Democrats to help Republicans with that nonsense talking point is only because they want to help their donors. There is no justification for it. Okay, well, you could say, well, it was all the corporate Democrats always tell me. Cenk, you have to be practical. You know, sometimes you just have to take reform a little bit at a time and change a little bit at a time. First of all, this is not moving the ball in our direction. So why do I have to move the ball in the wrong direction a little bit at a time? In fact, this would move it a lot at one time. That doesn't make any sense. They say, oh, but then we might lose. Really? Did you ever look at the polling? Or are you just lying to help your donors? Because if you looked at the polling, here's what you would have seen. Americans, this is according to a Gallup poll, recent Gallup poll. Americans say the upper income pays too much tax, according to 63% of Americans. And how about corporations? Those poor corporations, Republicans and now some Democrats are telling us to pay too much taxes. Well, Americans do not agree. 67% of Americans say corporations pay too little in taxes. Helping the Republicans in cutting taxes on corporations, if you cared about winning elections, is a disastrous idea. But they care more about making sure their donors are happy. Any well-meaning progressive who signed that letter trying to make sure they don't give tax cuts to the rich, get out, get out, get out, get out. It's a trick, it's a trap, okay? This is the corporate Democrats' efforts to help the Republicans actually pass tax cuts. You should get your name off that letter immediately. So they're gonna do it and the Democrats are gonna help them. Look, maybe I'm wrong, so we're gonna ask you guys. Because look, this is a fairly large progressive audience, and maybe you guys don't agree. Maybe you think, oh, unity, and we should work together and make sure that we do bipartisanship with the Republicans to do tax reform. So I'm gonna ask it. Now, obviously you can tell what my opinion is. I'm not hiding in the least bit. But I'm gonna ask it in the most Republican-friendly way. In the spirit, and this, the mainstream media love this framing. In the spirit of bipartisanship, should Democrats work with Republicans on tax reform? I'm skewing the poll in their direction, not my direction. I'm not calling it tax cuts, I'm calling it tax reform. And I'm saying in the spirit of bipartisanship. So I'm curious what you guys are gonna say, because you're all independent minded. You might say, no, Cenk, bipartisanship's a wonderful thing. And by tax reforms, maybe they just mean they're gonna raise taxes. Anyway, I look forward to your response, tytnetwork.com/taxes. My guess is that since you're watching and getting your news, whether it's here or reading it online instead of from the schmucks on TV, you realize exactly what this game is. Resist. Really? Okay, if this is your idea of resistance, no thank you. And if this is your idea of party unity, no thank you. I will fight this so-called tax reform to the very end, and you all should too, because this is the greatest American robbery you're ever gonna see. Help us build independent media together. Come join us, tytnetwork.com/join.